Oh,
Okay, just give everyone a couple of minutes to join. It's exciting. Hello, welcome to our attendees. Thank you for joining us today. Just to give everyone a couple of minutes just to get into the session. Welcome to Ding's Open Day. It's actually an open hour.
woo.
Should have made it an open hour, but
Yeah, it's true. Actually, it's not going to last for a whole day. Let's
you're
just be
now
clear.
going to be online for the next 7 hours.
I have been to a few things like that. I've got to be honest. It's
Yeah,
like, wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not a 7 hour online open day. Okay, welcome all. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tony Reeves, and welcome Phil Gom, our Director of Learning Experience Design. Thank you for joining us, Phil.
No worries. Pleasure.
And if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. Thank you for your interest in the course. So, over the next hour, we're going to work through the little bit of information about Ding's new PGCert, PGDip and MA in Creative Teaching and Learning Design, which we are super excited about. It's been a long time in the making. We've partnered with Arts University Bournemouth, and we are very, very excited to be launching this course in February 2025. So this will be the first of several open days where we'll be sharing a little bit of information about the course and just really excited to get people involved. So thank you very much for registering your interest. And for if you're watching this, as I say, thank you for watching the recording. So as we go through today, through the session, please do ask questions. We're going to try and cover as much as we can in a short space of time, but very aware that you may well have questions. Please just use your Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar and bring your questions into the session, and I will bring those in as we go through. So please just do say share questions or comments. Anything that you would like to ask, pop it in the Q&A and we'll bring that into the session. All right, so first Q&A, just to get your fingers limbered up on that Q&A bar. So really interested to know why you're interested in studying for a PG Cert, PG Dip or MA. Why have you registered your interest in this event? Why are you interested in the course? I mean, I've had a look at the attendee list, and we've got a really interesting selection of people from different sectors, technician demonstrators, course leaders, people working outside of higher education. So I'm really interested to get a sense of why you're interested in the course. So over the next few minutes, please do share a little bit of information in the Q&A about why you're interested in the PG Cert, the PG Dip, or the MA. All right. So overview of the session, just so you know what we're going to be doing. So give you a quick introduction to our course team, the Ding course team. Then we're going to look at why this course exists, why study teaching and learning design, what's in it for you, what are the benefits of studying this course. We'll give you an introduction to the course philosophy, and then we'll look at how it works. So by the end of the hour, you'll have a good sense of why the course is written as it is, why it exists, who's delivering it, and the nuts and bolts as to what the delivery looks like and what you can expect from participation. Okay. So up front, people don't like talking about costs, so we just thought we'll just put it front and center. So we've designed the course in 3 stages, and we'll talk more about those later. But essentially, each stage is £3,000 UK pounds, and you can do them cumulatively. So you can do the PG Cert and then stop. You can do the PG Cert, PG Dip, and then stop, and then do the MA. So you can do this cumulatively. It's £3,000 per stage. So I just thought I'd put that front and center, so there's no expectations of hidden costs. Those are the costs. So, course team. So, Ding is a learning design agency. We've been building courses for the last few years for a number of higher education and corporate providers. And my name's Tony Reeves. I'm the co-founder and managing director. Phil's our co-founder and director of learning experiences. We have Ray Martin, who is a specialist in inclusivity and neurodiversity. And she does a lot of writing for us on the blog and works across many institutions to mentor and support learners with a range of neurodiversity needs. Nicholas Houghton, Director of Research. So any research that we do, Nicholas looks after that. Ben Smart is our PG Cert subject lead, so he'll be looking after the PG Cert aspect of this course along with myself. And then we have Rosie Holmes, Tara Murphy, and Joel Porter. Rosie and Tara work as learning designers for Ding and also work in mentoring roles, and Joel's working with us as a learning designer. So across the team, we've got a really interesting mix of creativity, certainly, because everyone's come from creative backgrounds, a really strong grounding in pedagogy and aspects of andragogy, so child and adult learning, and also neurodiversity, mentoring, supporting learners with a range of diverse learning needs. So that's the course team. Those people will pop up at different points during the experience, some more in the PG Cert, some more in the PG Dip and MA. But the nice thing about having access to this much expertise is that we get to bring that much expertise into the course so that all of you get to benefit from that. Okay. Why study teaching and learning design? It's a good question. Phil and I debate this a lot, and we debated it a lot while putting the course together because obviously your course needs a strong rationale. But certainly for the PG Cert, there is a very clear reason why staff study PG Certs, why they exist in higher education, and it's because many higher education institutions require staff to have what's called a recognised teaching qualification, and this is either a PG Cert or what's called Advanced HE Fellowship. Our course is the first part is the PG Cert, but it also aligns with HEA Fellowship. It doesn't give you fellowship, but it gives you the material that you will need to make a fellowship submission. And the master's aspect aligns with senior fellowship. So whichever stage you're on, you'll be producing material that you can then convert into a fellowship application. And these qualifications, certainly the PGDip and the MA, are industry standard qualifications in aspects of learning, and they can open up other career options. So Phil, any thoughts on like the professionalism aspect of this in terms of the need to do a qualification to open up career options?
Well, I think that, and again, as Tony's rightly said, that we've had many sort of philosophical conversation about about this, and partly it's because learning, teaching, education, all these words tend to swirl around one another for a bit, and it's often because I think you're looking at an area where it's sort of not professionalized in a sense. There's a lot of chat, there's a lot of kind of people doing it, there's a lot of people sort of selling into that space, there's a lot of kind of consultation, there's a lot of kind of teaching and learning departments, there's all this kind of stuff, there's a lot. But I think sometimes that can speak to a slight sense of what we might call a donut problem, which is when you've kind of got a lot of activity, but if you look at the core, there's maybe a self-esteem or a professional self-esteem issue going on there. Sort of like people are often quite apologist about being interested in education. Sometimes people are a bit sort of shy about it. It can feel a bit kind of like, vocational as a problem as opposed to not professional, but just something people do because they love it, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of our conversations have been about trying to mitigate that donut effect, really, and sort of like talk to the core of it as a profession, and really sort of wrestle a little bit with that part of it. So yeah, that professionalization piece, we're very interested in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil. And we had a comment there. Thank you from one of our attendees interested in interested in taking this qualification. So interested in extending my qualifications to benefit my creative arts education teaching role. So I think the thing is building on that idea of professionalism. This course exists to provide opportunities for people to extend their professional qualifications in aspects of creative teaching and learning design. PG Cert focusing on specifically the nuts and bolts of designing, delivering learning experiences in more so in higher education, but a little bit beyond that. And then the PG Dip moves more into how you might use that skill set in a range of contexts. So thank you for sharing. Okay, let me return to this. Hang on. Oh, too many windows. Hang on a second, he said, juggling with windows. So it's interesting to think about why this course exists, because I worked in the teaching and learning space for many years, and the PG Cert was certainly that industry standard qualification that you needed to get a job. So this is partly why we have brought the PG Cert online. So let me just bring that up again. Here we go. So, oops, there we are. So the other reason why the course exists is transferable skills. So an increasing number of jobs do require learning design skills, and this is a very interesting area of learning at the moment. The sector is changing a lot. In the last 2 years, there was huge growth in learning design roles, partly because of the pandemic and the need for a lot of education providers to rethink their learning provision. So learning design became sort of one of the top recruiting jobs, certainly in sort of US, UK, and Australia particularly. But there is now a change going on, partly driven by AI, as AI is changing a lot of industries. But what I'm finding fascinating is that the skills that learning design qualification gives you are increasingly being required in other roles. So they're being integrated into roles. I've given a few examples here, which you might think, what's that? Like workforce development coordinator, corporate communications manager. The interesting thing about these sort of skills in these roles in large organizations is that they often require specific information management skills. And when you look at what teaching and learning design gives you, it is that ability to identify what people need, how they need to receive communication, how you might sequence a program of communication and activity, what the story is through that, what technologies you use to communicate. So learning design, although Phil and I have had lots of debates as to what is learning design and how do you apply it, it's very interesting to see these skills now appearing sort of alongside or as part of other job roles, Phil, isn't it? This is increasingly
Yeah,
what
I mean, I had a conversation literally just last week. Went and met a sort of an academic who's currently facing restructure, and sort of he's basically expiration dating because he knows this department is going to be sort of disappeared. And so we had a long conversation about transferable skills. And I thought what was fascinating is that I was talking to somebody who had 22 years of experience, sort of as a senior academic. His specificity was journalism. And one of the first insights in our conversation was that he felt that having been in an educational space for 22 years, he felt very de-skilled. He's like, how am I going to get work as a journalist? I've been teaching journalism for 22 years. And then I spoke to him about all the other things he'd been doing in that role. And it became very clear very quickly that he'd been essentially, he was like a conductor of an orchestra. He had been organizing information, producing experiences, activities, liaising with, multiple stakeholders, working with student complaints, working with metrics, working with kind of the university's key performance indicators, like they needed to improve the X and Y. And we stopped talking about journalism about 10 minutes into that conversation. And not because journalism wasn't his love and it wasn't important to him, but it was the fact that he was taking for granted this other suite of skills, which were all about the business of marshalling information and producing experiences for people, and the very best way in which those sequences could be kind of enacted or designed for or put into a particular space for a group of people. He was doing an extraordinary amount of sort of metacognitive work in terms of sort of learning. So not teaching or delivering journalism, but the art and craft of delivering subject specificity to people in ways most likely to transform them and to produce the effect that he needed to. And we spent the next hour and a half talking about this set of transferable skills, and it was a robust and yet slightly hidden suite of skills that this sort of very experienced educationalist had at his disposal.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I'm just looking through the list of the participants we have in the webinar today, and just looking at the broad range of interests just in the participants. So we've people working in technician, senior technician, demonstrator roles, people working in higher education, creative education, but also people coordinating large programs, people working in organizations adjacent to higher education, people working in corporate roles. So it's interesting to see how this focus on learning and learning skills, learning design skills, is increasingly sort of filtering out into a whole range of areas. And as you say, Phil, very quickly when you start talking about learning design or what people are doing, you very quickly end up talking about something else. So this is where the sector is at the moment, and this is what we're trying to address particularly with the PGDip and MA aspects of this course, is looking at how the learning skill set is applicable in a range of roles, because we have a lot of people talking to us, particularly people working in higher education, who are looking for other opportunities, and they don't realize that they have this huge skill set, as you were saying. So part of the PGDip and the MA is about helping people recognize the skills that they have and how they might be employed in other areas.
Yeah.
And then we use this phrase a lot, get up river. So really, we strongly believe that learning design is a skill set that enables you to lead in unfamiliar situations, partly because Phil and I find ourselves in this position a lot. When you work with a client, the client isn't quite sure what they're asking for, and your job is to make decisions, move forward with incomplete information, make sure that what you're doing aligns with organizational objectives, make sure you're managing budgets and making sure that everything feels very intentional. So these are all skills that aren't often talked about as learning design skills, but they are leadership skills, that they require you to make things happen and make confident decisions. So we're really strong advocates in this idea that learning designers are able to lead in uncertain situations, and often that is what makes a project succeed when you bring a learning designer in. And it is about having both the mindset and the skill set to do that. And it doesn't really matter about the subject area. We've worked in data, we've worked in creative arts, we've worked in a whole range of subject areas, but there is this core skill set that gives you the confidence to make these decisions. And so we really wanted to bring that through into the course, because that is absolutely what we believe is at the heart of this transferable sort of hidden skill set, really, of learning design. Just to give an example of that, this was a piece of work that we did last year with a company called Iosphere, and it was they were a startup offering data courses. Data training was a 10-week data bootcamp, and the brief was incredibly broad, and we were effectively paid to come in and help make sense of this project. So, I mean, Phil, you might want to talk to us a little bit more, because you're more involved in the
Well,
creative filming, but there was a lot of uncertainty around this, wasn't there?
I just think, um, yeah, it was it was brilliant. It was like there's that euphemism. Something was written on the back of a fag packet, or on the back of an envelope, and it was all I was saying. It was a very high level kind of like vision piece about what they wanted to do. But the really important thing about it is that they in that very sort of broad vision, there was a clear sense of how they wanted their course to be distinctive. Now, what was interesting is that for them, the term distinctive lived in a sort of a market share vernacular. So that was what they were thinking about. And then when we pushed them and said, well, why are these other courses that you're going to compete with, what's making them generic? And it was like, well, actually, it's because they're not doing this. They're not manifesting the imperfect scenario of the workplace. They're too siloed. They're too kind of perfectly educational. They're not in the real world. And actually, that was an incredibly helpful steer. And from a sort of a learning design point of view, and by that I just mean the ability to, using all of our experience as sort of in education, to imagine the components of a learning experience that was going to achieve the distinctiveness in terms of market share for this group of people, but perhaps, well, absolutely most importantly, solve the actual fascinating problem of the skills gap, the employability gap. So here we are being asked to design a 10-week experience for data analysts. There are dozens of these boot camps out there already. They're all failing to do one thing. The thing they're failing to do is this. That suddenly became the kind of the hidden curricula. We walked into that space with confidence, and then we were able to, once that had been aligned, we were then able to sort of take the client sort of on a journey really into sort of the power of narrative or the power of scenario-based learning. And suddenly all of that experience, all of that sort of great, important, creative educational stuff, we were able to give that away to a client who hadn't asked for it, didn't have that wasn't their vernacular, but we were able to translate, produce, and ultimately build confidence, and then ultimately build a course. And the course is currently, I think, on its sort of 7th, 8th cohort, and is motoring through and is doing this job of closing the skills gap. It was a lovely example of a job well done, really.
And I think the reason we wanted to share this example, another example here, which I'll talk about, which was a completely different client, but the same process. It showed that there was a need for learning design skills that was not called learning design. So
Yeah.
we've used these experiences to shape the courses, the PGCert, the PGDip, and the MA, because we can see that there is this core skill around learning design that often isn't asked for, but is actually the skill that is required. In this example, it was preparing a course for smart meter technicians, which doesn't sound very glamorous, but when we got into it, we found out that it was about scenario-based learning and narrative and characters. And actually, it was about sequencing an effective experience before a workshop, during a workshop, and after a workshop. So it was very much a
Well,
learning
and
project.
to say what it was really about was producing confidence in a group of learners. It's the classic thing that you have a group of people who are confronted with change, confronted with knowledge they don't have and perhaps are worried about acquiring. And then what you have to do is produce the conditions where those human beings feel held, supported, challenged, moved through an experience. And I'm telling you that hopefully, as I'm saying all of those things, that is easily recognized as the work of education, as the work of it's the work that everybody's doing, that's the work. And yet it's so often true that in these different sort of contexts, the vernacular is so different.
Yeah.
Kind of like the language, the customs, the rituals are so different that you could, if you perhaps were coming from an HE background, you could imagine that you had nothing to give, that your confidence is sort of shrivel at the idea of working for a corporate client because, you know, they're not going to talk about X and they're not going to couch their wants and needs in this particular language. And then you realize that if you are always thinking about the learner, if it's always about imagining the learning experience, that is something that it's always about that. It's always about that. And it's having the confidence and the strategic leverage to bring those two worlds together in the service of the learning experience. Because in the end, the client may be asking for X, Y, and Z. What they're really asking for is something that works. And if it works, it's going to work in the minds and the imaginations and in the behaviors of people who are the people who are going to do the course. So that's it. And that is where the work is always the same. But we have worked in so many different spaces with so many different vernaculars, with so many different stakeholders. And yet somehow we have always, of course, enacted the same set of learning design-based responsibilities and passion in that space.
So following on from that, I'm keen to see what learning design means to participants here. So if you can take a couple of minutes, just type into the chat, what does learning design mean to you? Because we shared a couple of examples there around what learning design can do, but learning design is an incredibly difficult term to design to find sometimes. And the more you look at it, the more it shifts and changes. So as we go through the next few slides, I'd love to hear a few thoughts as to what you think learning design is, because often that changes depending on your perspective and where you're working, and what you think it can provide. So do take a couple of minutes, use your Q&A button, and share a couple of thoughts about what you think. What does learning design mean to you? Really interested to hear your thoughts, and I'll bring those into the conversation in just a second. So for us, just to finish off this section, really, for us, learning design is about looking around all the other things that produce the experience. Often you have a curriculum. So Rubens vase is an illusion here where you can see two things going on. You have the curriculum, which is the vase, but you have the experience, which is everything that produces the curriculum, everything that informs that curriculum. So when we started to use this idea of Rubens vase, it really helped us understand what learning design was doing over and above just producing a curriculum. So we use this quite a lot to explain what learning design is over and above just your learning outcomes and curriculum. It's thinking about all the decisions that inform a successful learning experience.
Yeah, because a lot of people are they're most confident talking about the curriculum. That will be the case with subject matter experts. Sometimes the client is really clear about the thing they want to happen. It is more rare that those same people are talking to the, if you like, to that negative space, the stuff that sort of sits around and sort of presses the curriculum into kind of like into being. And we know this now that essentially if you're not engaging with that sort of the idea of the negative space, the way in which the curriculum is kind of like apprehended, then you're probably not producing an experience at all. You're potentially producing the acquisition of knowledge, which is something that the internet's really good at. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely. What are you doing over and above that completely?
yeah.
A couple of responses there. So, what is learning design? So, creating inclusive opportunities for participation that empowers learners. Yeah, so very much focusing on ensuring that everyone can join and be part of that learning experience. That inclusivity and accessibility is a very strong through line. And then addressing the needs of the students to help them achieve their goals or the official learning outcomes. Hopefully, these two aspects are aligned. Yeah,
Not
absolutely.
always.
Yes, no, absolutely right. Not always, but yeah, this is the thing. It's learning design opened up discussions around inclusivity, around technology, around learning outcomes, around business requirements, around direction of travel, around the more you stare at it, the more it sort of goes off in other directions, doesn't it? Which is why I often feel you say it's got a donut problem. The more you try and look at it, there's a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
I think so. Thank you for sharing those. Okay, so this is why we think we find learning design very interesting, but we also often find it quite hard to explain to people what we do, even though we can see the skill set is very valuable.
Well, I have just put a post on LinkedIn where I talk about how I hate the term learning design, which is a bit confusing. It's simply because there's sort of like in the semantics of it are mercurial, and they mean quite specific things to some people, and then mean different things to other people. So even the words themselves is a space, I think, and you'll see this, with the way that the job descriptions themselves are changing now. I think chasing job descriptions, the language of job descriptions is a fascinating thing, because as we know, I was a course leader for a long time, and course leader didn't quite capture the full range of skills that I was required to enact. So I think even something as simple and well understood as course leader or technical demonstrator, we all know, in fact, that the language is a trap, and we have to have a lot of confidence about what is also inside of those words. And I mean, I always say, Tony laughs at me, but I think learning design is a great example of a Terry's chocolate orange. It's just sort of like, it looks like a solid, it looks like something we all understand, but you can break it apart in all sorts of different ways. And the important thing about that breaking apart is that chances are each of those segments, and this goes back to the conversation I was having with the journalist academic, is that actually you break that apart, and each of those segments is itself a discrete and powerful skill set that somebody might just want on its own. So learning design is a really interesting space.
Yeah, and very nested. Yeah, lots of
Very
things.
nested, yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at the course philosophy. So very strong focus on doing throughout all three phases of the course. All the learning experiences begin with doing something, and we do this in a range of ways. Very task-based, activity-based, weekly challenges, weekly tasks. We use a lot of scenarios to model what these experiences and skills look like in practice. We use teamwork to enable you to understand what it's like to work as part of a learning design team and solve problems collaboratively. And this all helps to contextualize the course content. And Phil and I have talked a lot recently around the importance of doing, which isn't rocket science, but you'd be amazed how many courses focus on teaching first rather than doing. So we're very much focused on doing first and then teaching into that space afterwards. We developed a model very early on setting up Ding, which was we tried to produce what we thought were what we call the irreducible concepts that produced a great learning experience. And we came up with six: empathy, curriculum, inclusivity, facilitation, technology, and community. And together, when you combine these sort of primary colors of curriculum and empathy, it shows you how to produce an inclusive learning experience. When you combine curriculum and technology, you have to think about facilitation rather than just delivering information. And when you combine technology with empathy, you start to think about how you can use technology to produce community, particularly as most courses are now involve some form of online or blended or hybrid or asynchronous learning. So we have these three primary colors. They produce three secondary colors when you combine them. And for us, we've structured pretty much all of the work that we've done around these six pillars, because we think if you're ignoring one of those pillars, you're ignoring a key aspect of the learning experience. So this sort of six color model, we call it.
And
Um,
you'll hear, we lead with empathy, which and I've talked about this before, and I won't talk about it very much here. Just to say that when I use the word empathy, when Tony does, when Ben uses the word empathy, it's not the stuff of a Clinton's card, Valentine's Day card, or that notion of this sort of hug in a mug. It's this absolutely key, powerful muscle. It's a muscle because empathy is the act of imagination, and not to be confused with sympathy, and not to be confused with, if you're empathizing with stakeholders, you have to agree with everybody. But empathy is the act of imagination, and learning design is the act of imagining the needs of someone who you don't know, but who is going to experience often the things that you produce. That is an act of imagination. It is an act of empathy. So all, your curricula, if you take empathy out of the mix, you end up with stuff. And if you take empathy out of the mix of technology, for example, you end up with tools. You take that out, and suddenly you're in this things become quite bleak and things become very, very dull. So we will always lead with this idea of your responsibilities um, to imagine, and imagination is how do you travel into the minds of learners? What are they worrying about? What do you have to think about to ensure that they can access the curricula in a way that is inclusive and fair and exciting and challenging and all of those things? It is an act of imagination first and foremost. That is what learning design is.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why it's so integral to what we do, and the course philosophy is that whatever professional area you end up working in as a learning designer, to be good, to be effective, you are absolutely empathizing with the person that you're designing that experience for, whether it's a learning product or a course or an experience, whatever it happens to be. If you're not thinking about who it's for, the risk is A, it's not going to land, B, it's going to be very generic, and C, it's probably available somewhere else for free. So you really do need to think
Yeah.
about who you're designing for, I think. We I say situated learning. So we really use problems and challenges and scenarios. All the work that we've done since founding Ding has involved certainly empathy, but really looking at what learning design looks like in practice. And we've used a lot of scenario-based learning. We've built scenario-based learning courses. We use scenarios a lot in the work that we do to help people deploy and use and test their skills in context. So scenario-based learning is certainly a key thread that runs through the PGCert and the PGDip and the MA, because it gives you a reason to apply these things. It often nails the why of the course. Why does this exist? Why are we doing it this way? And particularly when you're dealing with abstract things such as learning theories, which many people find not particularly interesting. Some people do, but actually when you ask people what they want from a learning designer, often the first thing they say is, I want deep theoretical knowledge of what works in learning. And so you think, well, we better make sure that's part of the course then. But theories can be deathly boring. But for me, theories are absolutely fascinating because they're just tools. They're just ways of thinking about why learning might happen in a particular way, in a particular context. And if you swap a theory out for another theory, it's a bit like when you go to the opticians and they give you a different lens. And you think, oh, actually, now it looks a bit different. So we use scenarios to help you test and apply theories and look at them, use them on different problems. And through that, you very quickly start to see how theories can be used practically to solve problems.
And I just want to say to that that I think the other thing about theories, and Tony, you know, you said there that some people find theories very boring. My experience is some people find theories very comforting. And so one of the key discussions that we had very early on about distinctiveness and why we wanted to sort of go into this work in this space and sort of set ourselves up here is because of that notion that I myself, as an experienced academic, have met with and experienced situations where teaching and learning as a kind of expertise is experienced by educators, experienced by people as a kind of a lovely spa day. It's a lovely spa day. You go and have a lovely day away with your colleagues, and someone is invited into a workshop, and they talk about this extraordinary theoretical space in which we're all great teachers, or the student or the learner is this extraordinary kind of like blah, blah, blah. And everyone nods and has a lovely day. And then they think, that has nothing to do with my life. That's never going to work. And that's going to burn up on entry point with reality. Now, we've all, Tony's nodding, I'm nodding, we've all been in that space. And so one of the really key things is to not forget our experiences of what it's been like to be taught theories, or to be, you know, to have those moments where a shiny idea is delivered and knowledge that it's never going to fly because of budget cuts, or because of this is happening, or because of so on and so forth. And so we are definitely interested in using situated learning to road test theories, to produce the tensions, to produce the collisions between best practice and what actually happens, and not treat that as tragedy, not treat that as a kind of as something to be avoided, but treat it as the absolute terrain in which people need to feel incredibly confident, creative, agile, and meet things with some resilience in that sense. So one of the key things is, yes, learning theories can be boring for some people. Learning theories can be very comforting for people. What we're seeking to do with situated learning is to produce a space where they feel like active agents, where they catalyze something where they either fail or they transform. But the point is that you will be doing it and you will be trying it, and it will be happening as it collides with a more imperfect scenario, or a space that's a little bit more bumpy than perhaps those lovely away days where everyone is there, with their post-it notes.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that the scenarios enable you to model what problems look like in a safe space, and that is really why they're so powerful. Rather than talking about what might happen ideally to make something work really well, you can lead with this has gone wrong in this scenario. What can we do to fix it? And suddenly everything becomes a lot more practical and pragmatic and real.
Yeah.
So that is why we use scenarios quite heavily throughout the course. Question to you all. So we've talked about learning design. This course is about creative teaching and learning design. So I'm intrigued to ask you your thoughts on why does creativity matter when developing learning experiences? Because often people see the word creativity and they think, well, I'm not in a creative subject. I'm doing, engineering, generalizing here, but, or computing, or like, why is creativity not relevant to me? But if we think about learning experiences, why do you think creativity matters? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. So do use your Q&A button and share your thoughts there, because certainly when we founded Ding and we talked about Ding as a creative learning design agency, we knew that what we were doing was creative, but I think it perhaps took us a while to figure out exactly why the creative part was useful to other people. We knew it was a creative process, but often people didn't know why they needed a creative learning design agency. They didn't know necessarily that that was the thing that was going to solve the problems that they had. So creativity is one of those. It's a big word. It can excite people, but it can also put them off. But in your opinions, why do you think creativity matters? So while you're sharing your thoughts in the Q&A, I'll just share an experience as to we had recently. We were talking with somebody who was potentially going to want to do some work with us, and she said, my learning designers are all using AI and they're just producing the same stuff more quickly. And we just suddenly went, oh, hang on a second. I think what's missing is creativity and probably a bit of empathy.
I think
And
quite a lot of empathy.
quite a lot of empathy. Yeah, so
Uh,
this was someone working for the Department of Work and Pensions. She was managing a team and you know doing great work, but just it was a good example of why AI is perhaps not as it's not a it's not a magic button. You can't just press it and produce a great experience if you're not thinking about, as Phil said, empathizing with the people that you're designing for. But if you're not thinking creatively about different ways to engage those people, then there's a danger that you're just going to produce more of the same stuff more quickly. So I did like that quote. That did make me smile. And got a response that said, creativity suggests that building something new, i.e. thinking for yourself rather than applying a generic solution, one size doesn't fit all. I think that's exactly it. Yes. This idea that there's an awful lot of best practice out there. I think Phil used the phrase recently, LinkedIn is a cesspit of best practice, which is, loads of people are very happy to tell you about best practice and what works. And actually, often that doesn't measure up to the kind of the gritty, crunchy realities of a specific situation. And that's where you do need to deploy creativity to solve problems.
I think that thing about finding using creativity to find a solution. I mean, we talk about this a lot as well. I think creativity is all about constraints as well. It's about limitations, and it's about not tragedizing or dramatizing those constraints. And if you've worked in HE, where you could lurch from one tragedy to the next. Oh, it's another credit framework review. Oh, it's another restructure. Oh, there's no money. That wasn't my experience of it. I mean, I was having that experience. I just mean in terms of the focusing on the learners, as the constraints became more obvious, my job to be creative began to feel almost like more like I began to feel my confidence is growing in that space in a strange way. And one way we talk about it is like the north-facing garden, which is like I live in a house with a north-facing garden, and I just happen to like plants. Perhaps there's a clue here. I don't know if you can spot it, but I do. And when you've got a north-facing garden, there are rules. There are things that I garden on clay, and it faces north. If I decided to do sunflowers, that would be tragic because that's not going to happen. And you might love sunflowers, but the point is that there's a whole world of ferns and a whole world of other things out there which have their own aesthetic, their own answer to this problem. And I honestly think that when you hear about creativity, people don't talk enough about constraints. They don't talk about limitation. They don't talk about the north-facing garden. And I think if you're going to be a confident and if you're going to move into a leadership space in more complex organizations, if you're going to do that work, if you're not just going to be responding and like reacting to things, you have to feel some excitement about the relationship between creativity and constraint. For me, they have an absolute relationship. They are intimately connected, and it's where the work and the imagination starts. You're rarely going to work in a space without constraints, and I think that sometimes that sort of siloed learning and teaching zone of the perfect resort space isn't really preparing people adequately to use their imaginations and to be creative in that sense. So that's where I think creativity lives. It's about a buoyancy, a genuine buoyancy in the face of constraint.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's exactly that. It's when you're faced with restrictions in whatever area you're working in, creativity is the thing that is going to enable you to design pragmatically in response to those. So that's why we thought creative teaching learning design was the appropriate title for the course. We've looked at course philosophy. The final section is how it works. So in this last section of the session, let me just take you through the practicalities of how the course is delivered. So if you're wondering, we haven't designed it on the back of a fag packet. There is a strong methodology underpinning it. I'm not going to go through all that, but
as if we would do that.
What happens when learning designers build a course about learning design? You've got to hope it's a bit meta, haven't you? So it's flexible. It's very much designed to give you space to do the course around your life and work. Pretty much everyone on the course is going to be working alongside this, so it's fully online. You can participate from anywhere, and it is designed to be to enable you to engage alongside and around your professional and personal commitments. We very much advocate what we call a little and often approach, partly because it enables people to move more quickly, but also because that's what enables people to move to organize their learning around their work. So each week there's a series of short tasks, very application based, using short videos and then activities and then live sessions to consolidate what you've learned and discuss it. But this also makes learning visible. So it's the way that when you're doing online learning, you get people to produce work quickly, as I mentioned earlier. So this is all about leading with doing. And the more that you produce, the more we can give you feedback, the more you learn, the more we can see how you're progressing. So very much an advocate of little and often. We also are an advocate of teamwork, partly because in learning design, you're almost always working in collaboration with others, either with a subject matter expert, an SME, or in a learning design team. It's a very collaborative role. The team tasks that we have are very much about bringing you into contact with people from different disciplines, different professional areas, and we give you a series of scenario-based tasks that, as we've said, enable you to solve problems in different contexts. So, for example, an education-based scenario might be, as a team, you've got to give a review, a professional review, peer-supported review to a member of staff. So you'd watch a video of that played by an actor, and then you'd have to decide how to give feedback. You might be interviewing an SME. You get a video with an SME, turn that into a teaching session. You might be reorganizing a course in response to the introduction of a new credit framework. You might have to respond to a client brief in a specific industry, so taking it outside of higher education, or you might have to redesign a failing course. So all of these scenarios will be presented to you as a team, and as a team, you then work collaboratively to solve those. And that is really where an awful lot of movement and learning happens through these team-based activities. They really are an engine of learning through the course. So the team-based tasks really, really integral. And what that looks like in a typical week, there's a 2-hour lunchtime discussion session where everyone comes together. We talk through what you've been doing during the course of the week and the activities and the feedback. There's a 1-hour evening teamwork session where you get together, work on these scenarios in your team. There's about 5 hours a week of self-directed work, because obviously the idea is that you are already working in a role where you're applying this knowledge. So that's what makes up the rest of the hours on the course. And then the tutors are available during set office hours. So we have this very regular rhythm so that you can engage with the materials, build it around your work. If you can't come to one of the sessions, everything's recorded, so you can catch up on the sessions that way. So that is a typical week on the course. Obviously, we encourage you to try and make time to come to those live sessions, because that's really where a lot of learning will happen. But if you cannot make those sessions, or some of those sessions, you can very easily catch up on them. So that's how it's designed to be flexible. And just in terms of the learning environment, so a number of platforms, we use tools that are commonly used in learning design, as you would imagine. Some of these won't be a surprise: Zoom, Slack, Canvas, Google Docs, Padlet and Miro, sort of often the bread and butter of learning designers, but also opportunities to experiment with other tools that are increasingly industry specific. So through your project work, you might choose to explore different platforms and tools because you think that you might want to use that tool or you find it interesting. So we very much try and model a multi-platform approach because that is very much the environment that learning designers work in. And just wanted to talk you through the structure of the course. So we've got these three sections: PGCert, PGDip, MA. The PGCert is very much focusing on these core knowledge and skills, as we've said. There's sort of these 6 pillars that really focus on designing, delivering effective learning experiences. We look at theories, we look at technology and AI, assessment, feedback, and quality assurance, and inclusivity. So the PGCert is the sort of the nuts and bolts skill set of the learning designer that enables you to understand learning design, but it also enables you to understand teaching and how those two things work together. So it's really at the intersection of that. The PGCert is 60 credits, so each stage is 60 credits. We have an 8-week learning design bootcamp, which gives you the skills, and then a 16-week creative teaching and learning design unit where you review those experiences on the bootcamp, problematize them, think critically about them, and bring in some literature to start to analyze those. So that's the PGCert. PGDip, this is where we really shift on the professional application of that, as in professional outside of, or looking at professional application in a range of professional disciplines in contexts within and outside higher education as well. So the PGDip is really looking at what are the really core professional skills that learning designers need, and it's things like creative direction, the ability of the learning designer to work as a consultant to a business or a project, as we were saying, and sort of play back what's happening, understand the business needs and the learning needs. Very practical skills around video production, storyboarding, working with subject matter experts, and things like storytelling and narrative. So all of those gives you an insight into the sort of the complex skill set of a learning designer, where you have this sort of very powerful tool belt to make learning experiences, but also to work with others, to understand the needs of different stakeholders, and to bring all that together. And the PGDip, we have a learning design toolkit, which is a 20 credit unit, and then I think that's the wrong way around. A creative learning design toolkit, I think, is actually 40 credits, 16 weeks, apologies. And the creative teaching and learning design is 20 credits and 8 weeks. So very big focus on skills and toolkit at that PGDip level. And the masters is developing mastery. So you've gone through the PGCert and PGDip, or if you've started on the PGDip, you've got a lot of experience there, things to reflect on. Through that, we look at the thing that interests you the most, and you choose a project. You build a master's proposal through that. You choose a methodology. You think about what you want to become an expert in, what really interests you, and we support you to develop that master's project. So this is where we get into things like research questions, thinking about an audience for your output. It could be an academic audience, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. It could be a very professional sort of report, market research report, that kind of thing. So it could be that kind of that focus for your masters. So, but the important thing is making a research useful, making sure that it matters to someone and that it has a use at the end of it. But then planning and managing a project, then collecting the data and communicating research findings. So we have this is the clear through line through from the PGCert, which is very much about core learning and teaching, PGDip looking at some of the specific skills that you need to design and deliver outstanding learning experiences. And then the masters is really trying to get above that and look at it and then prepare you for PhD. If you want to go off to further study, the masters will absolutely do that and give you a good grounding in there. But really, it's all about the journey. I know it's all about the journey, but really, there's two main audiences at the moment coming into these courses. PGCert is focused on people who want to teach and design learning within higher education often, but also the PGDip and the MA provide a way for people who might already be working in education to think about how they might use that skill set in different ways. So there's different routes through this course. By working with us, our job is to help you choose the best path and really figure out what is the most appropriate start point for you based on your prior knowledge, your prior skills, and your prior learning.
And I'd just say philosophically that in terms of that path, the idea that you have to choose. My So I'm nearly 50 now, so I know a lot of academics, and we know that it's been a time of huge turbulence. In fact, ever since I started, there's always been turbulence. The sector is changing. It's never been more likely to be different than now in terms of hybrid models. So basically, it is turbulent. But the phenomena I have observed in talking to lots of incredibly experienced people who've been doing extraordinary work in the educational space for many years, or even for a few years, is that general feeling that whilst they've got all this experience, there's a slight sense of this phenomena that they're feeling de-skilled, or at least that their actual skill sets are hard for them to grasp and apprehend. And I would say that whatever happens on this course, one of the lasting impressions that we are seeking to produce is that you never diminish your skill. Educationalists, people who work in education, people who value the art and graft and craft of making transformations happen in people and learners, that one of the sort of the things that I'm very keen about is that stops feeling as if you're on the back foot. It stops feeling as if you've wasted your time and energy, and that there is nothing that you can do to enact your agency in this space, that the being done unto by change. I think that the thing I've seen the most, and the thing that worries me the most, is a cohort of extraordinary, experienced, creative, talented people who have forgotten something important about their imaginations and all the work they've been doing, and the ability to see your skills diversify, to have this speaks of what I said earlier about that professionalization piece and the self-esteem piece. I just think that it's easy for people who educate to lose something on the way. And certainly, having left the sector and having worked in these turbulent spaces, Tony and I think Tony and I have discovered some confidences, have discovered the value, have felt that value change in extraordinary and unpredictable spaces, have experienced the moment when a room starts to listen to you and trust you, and you are drawing on your experiences, you are drawing on some of those core abilities that perhaps you have been taken for granted. Yourself you have taken for granted, and some of your institutions perhaps just say, well, that's just what it's like, that's what you do. Actually, you have this extraordinary Terry's chocolate orange, in a sense, and I think that's one of the key things about the journey, which is about that's why we wanted to move into this space in so many ways.
And that's why it's been so lovely to have people come through the boot camp. We ran our learning design boot camp as a standalone course for the last couple of years, and to see the trajectories of people who've gone through that and then being able to articulate their skills with more confidence, or reskill themselves, or reimagine the skill set that they had and see how it could be applied in different ways. I think that is very much what this course aims to achieve, is just to show you that you have more skills than you thought, and that perhaps that you can think about how you might talk about those in different ways. And through these activities and exercises and tasks, you get to really discover that you've got more muscles than you thought you had, and that they can solve more problems than you thought perhaps you could solve. So
I think that a lot of educators are muscle bound, really muscle bound, but they're just wearing very, 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 very baggy clothes. It's a bit like, yeah.
Nice way of looking at it. Got a few minutes left in the session, so anything that we haven't covered, please do pop your questions in the chat. If there's anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like us to cover, please do let us know. Use the Q&A function if there's any questions that we haven't answered, or things that you'd like to add, or feedback, or anything that you'd like us to just answer in the last few minutes of the session. Please do put your thoughts in the Q&A, and I'll pick those up in just a second. So just to round this off, really, some of the takeaways, as we were just saying, learning design really is this discrete skill that you can learn alongside your specialism. So it doesn't really matter where you're coming from. Increasingly, what we're seeing is that you plug in learning design, and it's like a boost. It enables you to amplify what you're doing in different areas by giving you more clarity around, particularly around information management, communication, collaboration, designing experiences. So it is a discrete skill by itself. And this course is very much about learning through doing, as we said, through scenarios, active challenges. And really, this idea of specialist knowledge in learning, we've said, is a huge advantage across different sectors. I think this is the thing, particularly as AI has absolutely taken off in the last 18 months. There are huge implications for knowledge and learning, and I think we're only at the start of understanding what those are. And different people have different views on this, but your ability to understand what is going on when people are confronted with knowledge and experience, I think is really interesting. And a course in learning design should absolutely be confronting that, and not pretending to offer solutions, but
Yeah.
enabling you to think about how things are changing and how you can use some of these discrete skills to respond to some of these problems, whether it's AI or something else. It gives you the confidence to tackle some of these problems, I would say.
I know there's some questions in the chat. I just want to quickly say this, that you'll hear people talk about, with AI, the real power now is in the prompt, the being a promptologist and all those sorts of things. I think it's just a semantic game. Prompts and driving AI, it's about really good questions. It's about having holistic understanding. It's about understanding what this thing is for, where it goes. It's about leadership. It's about being strategic. It's about those that metacognitive space where you are driving this tool, but you're absolutely clear because your empathy and your imagination is like this powerful thing. This human resource is linked to your understanding of what the learners need in whatever context. But I think when people talk about AI and prompts, and that's the job, they're just talking about going upriver. They're talking about being upriver. They're talking about having the confidence to know why that is the right answer, why that will produce the conditions for invention, or why this will produce the conditions for transformation, as opposed to expecting the tool to know that for you. No garden spade has ever known that it's working in a north-facing garden ever. You have to know that. You have to produce that work. You have to put those choices together, and that's a confidence piece, and it's a leadership piece. And I just think that is where sometimes educationists perhaps don't consider themselves as leaders. They've often been leading cohorts through learning experiences year on year on year, year on year, year on year. Leadership is something that again needs to be surfaced and talked about, and it needs to be sort of like those muscles need to be worked on, so people are happy to talk about it and happy to present themselves accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is very much about working those muscle groups, as you say, and helping people realize they have more muscles than perhaps they thought they had. A couple of questions there, practical ones. Yes, very, very obvious ones. Thank you for raising those about application start dates. So the course is open now. I've shared on the screen there, this is the PGCert, but there's a separate page for the PGDip and the MA. So just through the AUB website, just search for AUB PGCert, Creative Teaching Learning Design, or AUB PGDip or MA, Creative Teaching Learning Design, and you can apply direct through the AUB website. You've got the course philosophy, course outline, all the course documentation is on there. There's information about how to apply and the fees and funding and the resources. So please do apply direct through the website. The course, the PGCert starts in February this year, February 2025. Sorry, next year. So please apply now for enrollment sort of towards the end of January, starting in February. And the PGDip will start then in September 2025. So PGCert starting February 2025, PGDip September 2025. So please do put your applications in, and any questions with that, please contact the AUB team or us directly. You can message us
directly. Yeah.
at ding.global. That's absolutely fine. We'll put that address on the screen for you. There we go. So got the Ding website there, ding.global. There's more information about the course on the website. And anything else you'd like to talk about, please just email us directly. We're always happy to chat. You can book an appointment with us through the website. We're happy to jump on a call. If you'd like to discuss whether you think the course is right for you, and you're just always very happy to do that, because if I was investing this much money in training, I'd want to know that it was the right thing. So please do book an appointment with us. We are absolutely happy to chat about any aspect of the course, where you're coming from, what your aspirations are, if you're in a process of thinking about career change, or if you're thinking about going into a different industry, whether it's higher education or a different one, please do get in touch. Always very happy to chat career progression and learning design and teaching over a coffee. So
if you want any ideas about what plants would work well in a north-facing garden, I'm happy to take. I'll take that email, right, Tony?
Bill is a great consultant, garden design consultant. So anything tangential around garden design, then
it's perfect.
I'll refer you to my esteemed colleague.
Yeah, look at the state of your spider plant in that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I mean, come on.
Don't look at my spider plant. That's all right. It's much better. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you for those of you in the live session for participating. Thank you for your questions. I hope you found that useful. And if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching to the end. And obviously the same goes. Please do get in touch if we can answer any questions for you if you'd like to discuss any aspects of the course. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Phil.
No worries.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. We will be running more of these sessions, so please do come along to another session if you would like or recommend to a colleague. If you think anyone else might be interested, please do send them our way. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend, and we will hopefully see you in February. Take care.